What if the people you mourned for over a decade weren't gone at all? What if husband and daughter you buried were living just miles away from where you said goodbye? This isn't a ghost story. This is a tale of deception, heartbreak, and a secret that would shatter everything you thought you knew about love and family. Rosalinda Torres thought she had laid her loved ones to rest, but a 23-second video would turn her world upside down, revealing a truth more unimaginable than death itself. Stay with us as we unravel the mystery of what really happened that fateful day in Batangas. Vicente Royos wasn't the type to command attention. Born in 1965 in Cavite City, his early years were shaped by the steady hum of the Philippine naval shipyard, where his father welded steel and his mother sold fresh fish at the local wet market. Accurate life rooted in hard work and simplicity. At 19, in 1984, Vicente followed in his father's footsteps, enlisting in the Philippine Navy. He was disciplined, determined, a young man eager to serve his country. As a communications officer, he dedicated 22 years to the Navy, spending more time with his equipment than with people. Through the years, the Navy became his world. But in 1998, tragedy struck. Vicente's first wife died during childbirth, and their child was stillborn. A loss so profound it carved a deep, unhealing wound in him. Those who knew him said it was as if he became a shadow, forever haunted by what he had lost. Friends would later describe Vicente as the kind of man who could fix anything with his hands, but nothing with his words. After the death of his wife and child, Vicente shut down emotionally, retreating into solitude. What remained of him was a man who could repair engines, boats, and machines, but had no words left for the world around him. In 2006, after retiring from Tenavi with a military pension, Vicente moved to Nugu, a coastal town in Batangas, far from the memories of Manila. He found peace in the quiet rhythm of boat repair. Yet, the ghosts of his past lingered like a constant tide. Vicente became a man of few words, a stoic figure in a world that seemed to move on without him. His past, defined by loss and isolation, left him emotionally distant until the day he met Rosalinda. Rosalinda Torres would change everything. Rosalinda Torres was only 32 when her world shattered. A dedicated wife and mother, she had everything until one tragic day when a jeep accident stole her husband from her. Her daughter, Catalina Lena, as everyone called her, was just 3 years old. Left to raise Lena alone, Rosalinda poured herself into her work as an elementary school teacher in Nugu. Her life became a delicate balance of nurturing her daughter, managing her. For 7 years, it was just Rosalinda and Lena facing the world together. But it wasn't easy. Rosalinda had no family nearby to lean on, and with each passing year, the loneliness grew. She was determined to provide the life Elena deserved. In 2007, at the annual community fiesta, Rosalinda's life took a turn. At 33, she met Vicente Rose. He was 42. Quiet, reserved, so different from the men she had known. Vicente wasn't there to sweep her off her feet. He was a man who had lost as much as she had. She didn't need a savior. She didn't need someone to rescue her or sweep her away with grand gestures. She needed stability. Someone who wouldn't zap her like every other man who had come and gone in her life. And Vicente, he seemed like the answer to every prayer she'd whispered in the dark. After all, he'd carried his own grief, and somehow, in that shared silence, they found comfort. Rosalinda hoped that with Vicente, maybe, just maybe, they could build something lasting. Something that would fill the empty spaces in their lives. They married in March 2008. A quiet ceremony by the sea. It wasn't grand, but it was intimate. Jasmine flowers adorned the small venue, and Lena, now 11, stood between them during the vows. She was the center of this new family, the new beginning. Vicente, who had always been reserved, showed a city of himself that Rosalinda hadn't expected. He was patient with Lena, had taught her how to fish, how to repair engines, how to navigate by the stars. The days were simple but filled with moments of shared knowledge. And it wasn't long before Vicente bought a small bunker and outrigger boat for weekend trips out to sea. For the first time in years, Vicente began to feel like a father. Lena, who had spent her early years grieving the loss of her own father, began calling him Tate, a Filipino word for father. Within 6 months, Rosalinda was touched by how quickly their bond grew. Teachers actually began to notice subtle changes in Lena. She was becoming more mature, more observant, almost as if she was absorbing more than the typical onion-year-old should. It was clear that Vicente had a powerful influence on her. She had always been curious about the world, but now Vicente was teaching her more than any classroom could. They started homeschooling her in Marinesians, charting the stars and currents. But while these lessons were meant to guide her future, something else was quietly taking shape. But as months went by, Rosalinda noticed that something troubling. Lena stopped attending youth group. She stopped inviting her friends over for sleepovers. The carefree laughter that once filled their home was replaced by an unsettling quiet. Lena spent more and more time at the boat dock, with Vicente and less time being the teenage girl Rosalinda thought she was becoming. Rosalinda thought she was watching her daughter grow up. She had no idea she was watching her daughter disappear. September 14, 2012, a Friday morning. The sky was clear and the waters calm. Vicente and Lena packed the small bunk for what Rosalinda believed was just another routine weekend fishing trip to Blayan Bay, a place they'd visited before. Nothing out of the ordinary. Lena, at 15, was becoming more independent. Vicente, 47, more withdrawn as usual. They left at 5:30 a.m. from the Nisugbu dock, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. The forecast for the weekend was calm, with no storm warnings in sight. They promised Rosalinda they'd be back by sundivening. "See you Monday, Mama. I love you," Lena called out, her voice carrying on the wind. Rosalinda smiled, waving back, thinking it was just another trip, a routine she had come to accept. She watched them fade into the distance, her heart light with the hope of their safe return. She had no idea that this would be the last time she'd see them as a family. 72 hours later, the boat came back, but they didn't. The boat was found, but Vicente and Lena were nowhere to be seen. The silence was deafening, and the questions began. Where were they? What had happened on that quiet weekend trip, Sunday night? No call, no text. It wasn't unusual for them to be a little late, but when Monday morning came, and there was still no word from Vicente or Lena, Rosalinda's worry turned into panic. By 6:47 a.m., a fisherman spotted their bunker drifting 8 kilometers off Matabangay Beach. The engine was still running, but there was no sign of anyone aboard. The Philippine Coast Guard quickly recovered the boat. The supplies were untouched, canned goods, bottled water, all neatly packed as if they had just set off for their trip. But something wasn't right. The life vests were missing. Lena's sandals were found under the seat, and Vicente's hat hung carelessly in a hook. Everything as if they had stepped away for just a moment. Yet, there were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no frantic attempts to radio for help. The radio was fully functional, but never once used. The search lasted 9 days. Helicopters searched the skies, dive teams scoured the deep, and volunteers from 3 provinces joined in. They combed every inch of the sea, but found nothing. Not a body, not a single piece of clothing, not even a floating life vest. On September 24, 2012, the Coast Guard suspended the search. The official report read, "Presumed drowned, likely swept." The undercurrent, the conclusion seemed simple enough, but Rosalinda knew Thesia. She'd spent years living by its rhythms, and something about this didn't feel right. 2. To Rosalinda, themes where the Coast Guard gave didn't match evidence before her eyes. The both had returned, but where were Vicente and Lena? The sea hadn't taken them, had it? What happens when you lose someone without closure, when there's no funeral, no body, no goodbye? You don't feel. You haunt yourself. For 12 long years, Rosalinda lived in the kind of grief that doesn't fade. It lingers, it settles, it becomes part of you. In 2013, the court declared Vicente and Lena legally dead, but the insurance company denied her claim, citing insufficient evidence of death, no body, no witnesses, no closure. Rosalinda kept their rooms, untouched for all thesaurs, unwilling to change a thing. Every September 14th, she lit candles at dock as if keeping vigil for the love of her life and their daughter. She lost her teaching job, unable to focus, her thoughts constantly drifting. To Vicente and Lena, she withdrew from everything, from church, from friends, from life. The woman who had once been a vibrant teacher now became known in town as the widow who wouldn't let go. Her cousin once asked her, "Why don't you move on?" Rosalinda's answer was simple but heavy with meaning. How do you move on from people who never left you? They're in every corner of this house, every wave that crashes every time I close my eyes. She was a woman living in the past, suspended between memory and grief. Butin, May 19th, 2024. Everything changed because the dead came back to life. And they weren't alone. It all began with a simple text message from her childhood friend Elena, who was traveling through Indonesia for a teaching conference. Elena had sent a video captured during a lively street festival in Ubud, Bali, a place Rosalinda had only seen in pictures. The video was 23 seconds long, filled with color, dancing crowds, and the traditional sounds of gamelan music that echoed through the streets. But something stopped Rosalinda. As the video continued, her eyes fixed on an unusual moment. At the 11-second mark, a couple danced in the background, lost in the music, unaware of the camera's lens. At first, it was just another couple enjoying the festival. But then, something felt wrong. She watched it once, then froze, watched it again, and again. Her hands started shaking as a cold realization crept over her. The man was older, heavier, with a graying beard, but the posture, his stance, the way he moved, it was unmistakable. It was Vicente. The woman beside him, she was no longer the 5-year-old Lena Rosalinda remembered, but her neck, the curve of her smile, the way she leaned into him, it was her. The same way Lena had always done with Vicente. That was Vicente. That was Lena, alive together. And they weren't father and daughter anymore. The life she thought she had lost forever was staring back at her through a 23-second video. But who were they now? And why were they here in Bali living a life she had never known? Rosalinda didn't call the police, not yet. She couldn't bring herself to. She needed to be sure, because if she was wrong, she'd have finally lost her mind. And if she was right, well, she'd lost something far worse. She sent the video to a friend, a forensic analyst who specialized in facial recognition. "Can you help me with this?" she wrote. Minutes later, he replied, "Facial structure matches 94% probability." The message felt like a cold slap. She couldn't ignore it. Next, she scrubbed the background of the video. She recognized the market district, Ubud, Bali. She contacted Elena immediately. "Where exactly did you film this?" Her search expanded. She began looking into Filipino expats in Bali, hoping for a clue. And then, as the pieces began to fall into place, she found something that sent her heart into a spiral. They weren't hiding under different identities. They were hiding under the same identity as husband and wife, Victor and Catalina Reyes, a couple who had been living in Bali for 11 years. She sat there for hours, her hands clutching the certificate. 3 hours to be exact. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the screen, unable to move, unable to process the weight of it. So simple yet so devastating. They didn't die. They eloped. June 3rd, 2024. Rosalinda boarded a flight to Bali. She told noon, packed light, keeping only the essentials. She withdrew her life savings, 85,000 pesos, and left the house with the lights on, just like she had every night for the past 12 years. A small ritual she'd kept, hoping for their return. After an 8-hour journey, Rosalinda arrived in Ubud. She checked into a cheap guest house near the market, her body weary, but her mind sharp. The next 6 days were a blur of tracking, questioning, and waiting. She needed to find them, needed to see them with her own eyes, to confront them with the truth of what they had stolen from her. She found their home, a modest villa nestled on a rice terrace, a mere 30 minutes from Ubud's town center. It was quiet, tucked away from the publicity, as if designed to be hidden. They're in a small tour guide business for Filipino tourists, keeping to themselves, living the life they'd chosen. They were known locally as Vicky and Kata, a polite, quiet couple who kept a low profile. But Rosalinda wasn't fooled. She learned quickly that Lena, now 27, had become a local teacher. teaching English to children, and Vicente, now 59, led diving excursions for tourists, a life so far removed from the one they had left behind in Nassau. On the seventh day, Rosalinda followed them to a beachside restaurant. She watched them order, watched them laugh, watched Vicente reach across the table, gently taking Lena's hand, not like Arthur would, but like a lover. And that's when she knew this wasn't Stockholm Syndrome. This wasn't coercion. This was a choice that they made together. A choice that required her to die emotionally, financially, spiritually so they could live. In that moment, Rosalinda Torres stopped being a victim. She became something else entirely. June 10, 2024, 6:47 p.m., the same time the Coast Guard had found their boat 12 years ago. A strange, almost cruel symmetry in that moment. Rosalinda stood outside their villa, heart racing, mind numb with anticipation. And when they walked out hand in hand, no care in the world, she stepped into the light. In that moment, the truth was clear. Nothing would ever be the same, not for any of them. In that moment, Rosalinda had three choices: walk away, call the authorities, or become something she never thought she was capable of becoming. And that's when Rosalinda realized the justice system wouldn't give her peace. A courtroom wouldn't give her back those 12 years. Nothing could undo what they'd done. So, she made a choice. The kind of choice that only makes sense when you've spent 4,380 days mourning people who never died. What happened next shocked the anti-re-expat community in Bali. And when that truth came out, it divided an entire nation. Rosalinda didn't kill them. No, she recorded the entire conversation, every word, every confession. She then called the Philippine embassy and the Indonesian police. Vicente was arrested for falsifying documents and child grooming. His crimes, hidden under the guise of love, were now out in the open. Lena, now an adult, faced no criminal charges, but her identity was revoked. Her past was erased. Her life rewritten by the very people who had manipulated her. And as the details surfaced, the case became an international scandal, dividing opinions across borders. But there's what broke the internet. During police interrogation, Vicente admitted something that changed everything. Had planned the disappearance for 3 years since Lena was 12. He had groomed her, manipulated her, convinced her that by her love was special, that Rosalinda would understand, that they needed to start fresh. Psychological evaluations revealed that Lena had been systematically isolated, emotionally liquidated, and psychologically coerced into believing this was her choice. AT-15. She didn't run away with a lover. She was taken by a predator who had spent years making her believe that she wanted to go. The truth was worse than Agnon had imagined. The love story they had sold to the world was nothing more than a dark, twisted manipulation of a vulnerable child, an abuse of power that had stolen 12 years from a mother who never gave up hope. For Rosalinda, the justice system could never give her back those lost years. But with Vicente's confessing and Lena's psychological recovery, the pieces of her daughter's stolen innocence were finally being returned piece by piece. Sometimes the hardest part isn't knowing the truth. It's realizing that even with the truth, you can never undo what's been done. That trial lasted 8 months. Vicente was sentenced to 15 years in an Indonesian prison for document fraud, child exploitation, and international flight. But despite the charges, the court couldn't charge him for what happened in the Philippines. Statute of limitations, jurisdictional issues. The legal system, it seemed, could only go so far. Lena, in a turn that stunned everyone, testified against Vicente. She revealed the years of manipulation, control, and isolation she had suffered. In a voice that trembled with a mixture of regret and anger, she admitted that she once believed she loved him, but now with clarity understood that she had been groomed. She spoke of how Vicente had manipulated her, how he had convinced her that their love was special, that they were destined to be together. But the truth was far darker, and for the first time, Lena saw it for what it truly was. Despite Lena's testimony, the Philippine authorities issued a warrant for Vicente's arrest. But extradition from Indonesia was impossible. The legal system had failed to bring justice for the full extent of his crimes, and Rosalinda felt the crushing weight of a system that couldn't protect her daughter or her. On the day of sentencing, as Vicente was led away in handcuffs, Lena approached Rosalinda outside the courthouse. Her voice was soft, almost pleading as she took a step toward the mother, who had once held her close. In that moment, Rosalinda made a decision. She couldn't bring her daughter back, not the girl she had raised, not the girl who had vanished that fateful day. In the end, it wasn't about justice or revenge. It was about reclaiming what she could never have again, her peace. Some wounds, no matter how deep, are beyond healing, and some coerces, no matter how painful, are the only way forward. Today, Vicente sits in Carabocan prison in Bali. He'll be 74 when he's released. If he's released, Lena returned to the Philippines. In 2025, she now lives in Manila under her birth name, no longer Catalina Reyes, but someone else entirely, trying to leave the past behind. She works with an NGO helping trafficking survivors, using her painful past to help others escape the same fate. But despite the years, she has never publicly spoken about the case. Beyond her court testimony, the silence has a shield, and the wounds run deep. She tried to reconnect with Rosalinda. She wrote letters hoping for a bridge back into her mother's life, but they were turned unopened. Rosalinda Torres returned to Nasugbu, but she didn't go back to the house she had once shared with them. She sold it. She used the money to start a foundation for families of missing persons, giving others the hope she had lost. She gives talks now about manipulation, about how tortured in plain sight, about how grief can be weaponized. She's 50 years old and never remarried, but she's no longer waiting for ghosts. In an interview, she said, "People ask if I forgive them. I didn't. Forgiveness is for mistakes. This was a choice. They chose each other, and they chose to bury me alive. I didn't get justice, but I got my life back, and that's more than they ever gave me." Rosalinda's journey is one of survival, resilience, and reclaiming a life stolen from her. She may never find peace in the way most people hope, but she has found something far more valuable: her voice, her purpose, and the strength to live again. This isn't a story about a boat that came back empty. It's about a woman who spent 12 years drowning on dry land. It's about a predator who disguised himself as a protector. And it's about a girl who was stolen so slowly she didn't even know she was gone. So, I want to ask you, if you were Rosalinda, what would you have done? Could you forgive? Could you walk away? Or would you fight for a justice that the law couldn't give you? This case is still unfolding. Lena's story is still being written. And Rosalinda, she's finally living without looking over her shoulder. If this story moved you, share right, because somewhere right now, there is a mother lighting a candle for someone who isn't dead. And maybe, just maybe, this story will help her see what she's been missing. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have done what Rosalinda did? And don't forget to subscribe, because every week we uncover true crime stories that law enforcement couldn't close. Stories like this, stories that demand to be